And we're back in the car on a Tuesday like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Tuesday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So this is a little bit of a glass is half empty or half full kind of an episode because we're talking about a 90s blockbuster, a summer popcorn munching 90s movie which was released on this day, 1998. So that is great. I love to talk about 90s movies, the single best decade ever for Hollywood in my esteemed, well, not really, but in my academic, I can give myself that opinion. Hollywood never did it better than it did it in the 90s, and I'm always fired up, as you can tell. I haven't even had any caffeine since 8 this morning, but I'm fired up nevertheless, getting to talk about 90s summer action blockbuster spectacle. So you could say, well, why? How could the glass be half full? This is a full glass, right? No, it's not. Because on this day, 1998 saw the release of the Emmerich Devlin action extravaganza. It had been teased for I don't even know how many months. I feel like they did something similar to what they did with, when I say they, it wasn't literally the filmmakers, Emmerich and Devlin, but the way the studio promoted Independence Day, we saw a teaser trailer. Independence Day was released July 2nd or July 3rd, 1996. We saw a teaser like a year in advance. Remember the White House going kablooey? We saw that, right? So they did something similar with Godzilla, released on this day, 1998. We started seeing all kinds of weird ads on TV and weird looking posters where they were talking about how big, I guess, the Godzilla creature was. But the way they sold the film, and you know, as a New York University Film School graduate, it was very recent history. I recently talked about May 14, 1997, when I graduated NYU. We're now talking about only a year later. And I had some success, modest, very modest success as a screenwriter, getting one script optioned and then another script option. And it looked like one project was going to go with Kushner Locke. And there's all this stuff going on. Again, this is 28 years ago. It's ancient history. But I was still engaged in the business, and I still had the academic mindset of seeing things that may not have been intended by the filmmakers, but in the case of the marketing, when they're promoting Godzilla and the posters and the advertisements on TV for months keep using the same tagline, 3 words, not 2 words, Mr. President, plausible deniability, 3 words to sum up not only the movie, but society at large. In 3 words, they're not only describing the experience that you're going to have, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, seeing the movie Godzilla. Why should you see Godzilla? They were making a commentary on society. I believe they were having a little bit of fun with a concept and a notion that took root in the 90s to try to make, I want to say, certain guys feel not as bad about themselves. There was a growing movement, wink, wink again, nudge, nudge, growing new. There was an idea. It wasn't the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. Let me put it that way. But Godzilla was promoted with the 3 words, size does matter. And you can't tell me that they're not making an arch comment on the idea that, well, really, it's not important. Well, what does the it refer to? I can't tell you here. This is supposed to be a family-friendly podcast. I'm just messing around. I was about to say I'm just fucking with you. But size does matter. That's how this film was promoted. And no less an authority. Everyone's an authority. No less an authority than James Cameron, while winning the Best Director Oscar at the 1998 Academy Awards in March, 2 months before Godzilla was to hit the multiplexes here in the States. There's Big Jim up on stage As he famously said, I thought Warren Beatty was going to take a swing at me. Cameron's not one for self-deprecating humor, but his recounting of when he did, I'm the king of the world and all of that stuff, I think that was later in the show. He said, man, Warren looked at me. I thought he was going to tackle me on stage. He just knew, said, man, Warren Beatty thinks I'm an idiot. Am I? That sort of thing. It's kind of funny. So James Cameron gets the Best Director Oscar. And what does he say? I guess this means that size does matter. That's funny. That's better than him saying, I'm the king of the world, even though I know he was mimicking the character that Leo plays in the movie. But him making a size does matter joke, terrific. Now, I remember seeing the full theatrical trailer to Godzilla. I figured the film was going to be reasonably entertaining. The irony of Emmerich and Devlin, that's Noah Emmerich and Dean Devlin, for those who don't know the names. It's not one guy. It was two, director, producer, kind of a combo. Michael Bay, Jerry Bruckheimer, that's the late, not Jerry, I'm sorry. It was Don Simpson who passed. Man, that's pathetic. But in other words, it was a filmmaker, producer kind of team, if you will. So the previous film they made, Independence Day, I've got to tell you, that movie was better than it should have been, and it was better than I expected. As somebody who at the time of that film's release was 22, was still knee-deep in the SHIT, the kind of difficult chunks of New York University Film School. I wish I could tell you that it was easy, but it really wasn't as easy even for a film geek such as myself. We had to do a lot of work. There was a lot of reading. But based on what I knew of cinema, I could not imagine that Independence Day was not going to be terrible. It might be fun. It could just be a guilty pleasure kind of a movie, but there's no way that the film is going to be any good. It's going to be trash. The fact that Independence Day, yes, it has trashy elements. Yes, there are campy elements. I mean, Harvey Fierstein, I was screaming. I met Harvey Fierstein. What a great guy. I met him at a premiere in 2000 of a really good movie called Playing Mona Lisa. It was written and directed by a guy I was supposed to work with, and that didn't happen. That's the business for you, right? But Independence Day is a much better movie than it has any right to be. So even though my expectation for Godzilla, well, this is not going to be any good, this is going to be terrible. I had said the same thing about Independence Day, and I was wrong. I think Independence Day is a terrific film. It is not just a guilty pleasure movie. The character work, the actors from Randy Quaid, Will, obviously, and Bill Pullman, the film has better performances than you would expect. Even Adam Baldwin, and when I say even, right, he's not a Baldwin brother, but he's the kind of actor, that should have been a throwaway role. He plays the military guy when they get to Area 51. He's really good in that role. He played famously Animal Mother in Full Metal Jacket about a decade prior. But me being wrong about Independence Day, and happily so. I saw Independence Day on its opening day. I couldn't believe how good it was. I would have given it 3.5 out of 4. I was hoping for 2.5. Maybe it'll be an entertaining bad movie that I could say it's 2.5. It's, thumbs up if we're going to go with the Siskel and Ebert. We're going to get to them in a minute. So I had hope that Godzilla, maybe it'll be fun. But when I saw the casting, this is one of those things where an actor I love Matthew Broderick. He's one of our guys. He is one of the Gen X guys because of Ferris Bueller's Day Off and 2 other movies that I really like. Max Dugan Returns in 1982, a terrific kind of a comedy drama with the phenomenal, the late great Jason Robards Jr. Boy, I love that guy. And a 4-time Oscar nominee, and there were people who thought she should have won at least one statue, Marsha Mason. Max Dugan Returns is a terrific film. And then Broderick's next movie was War Games, which I would say is a great movie from the 80s. Then he did Lady Hawk. Yeah, some people were into it, not really. And I'm not really that big of a fan of Ferris Bueller, but Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a seminal film from the era. It is a classic from the era. Just to give you an idea where my head's at, I like Ferris Bueller's Day Off more than The Breakfast Club. I'm not a fan of either of those movies. I don't understand why. I think Just One of the Guys is better than both of those movies. But hey, I actually don't think I'm alone on that one. There are plenty of Gen Xers that would list Just One of the Guys as their favorite kind of teen sex comedy in the PG-13 realm of the decade of the 80s. But casting Matthew Broderick in the lead and then making a running gag of his name, Roger Ebert, I'm going to keep bringing his name up, but not in the way that you think if you haven't seen this movie. Roger Ebert had he had a glossary of movie terms that he would go to, and it was mostly in fun. But there were certain things that you could count on in cinema, particularly Hollywood cinema. One was the law of economy of characters. He said in your typical Hollywood production, there are no random characters that are just hanging out in the story. There's always a reason. So the way he would describe it is if it's a mystery, the character who shouldn't even be, where you say, why is this guy even in the movie? That's the killer. Because he's got to be in the movie for something. Well, Ebert also had another glossary term called the law of funny names. And what he said was, if a movie has to hit you with a character's name being funny, they're in big trouble. And it's this Mark Hamill thing about Harrison Ford, where Hamill told the story, and it's a similar concept, where Mark Hamill is looking at some of the dailies, and he says something to George Lucas like, George, don't we need to do a little bit of continuity work, because I just got attacked. This is the trash compactor scene. I got attacked, and my hair is wet, and then it's supposed to be about a minute later, and my hair is dry. Shouldn't there be wet, and this should still be schmutz in my hair? And George Lucas didn't really answer Mark Hamill. I think he wanted Hamill to just, read your lines, kid, shut up. And so Mark Hamill then went to Harrison Ford and said, I mean, don't you agree with me? And Harrison Ford supposedly said, kid, if they're looking at your hair, we're in big trouble. If you have to use someone's name to try to get laughs, you're in big trouble. And the fact that they randomly named Matthew Broderick's character Nick Tatopoulos, I once said, speaking of Ebert again, he talked about the movie Tango and Cash, the Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell. I love it. That's a real guilty pleasure movie. Jack Palance plays a character in that movie. His name is Yves Perret. And Ebert, in his review, said, in all of human history, forget cinema, in all of mankind, millions of years of evolution, nobody has looked less like an Yves Perret than Jack Palance. Nobody. I would say that few people could possibly look less like a Nick Tatopoulos than Matthew Broderick, but that's his name. So you have some really good genre performers in Godzilla. But Broderick is horribly miscast. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. I love the guy, but it just doesn't work. You have John Reno, who is, and certainly in that decade, was practically a cheat code. He was coming off of, Mission Impossible, and he had done Leon the Professional with a very young, in her film debut, Natalie Portman, Gary Oldman. He's tremendous. He's the best thing about Godzilla. That guy has such an incredible gravitas. Every line reading, because it's John Reno, feels more important than it actually is. His character in the movie is kind of a figure of fun. He's just searching for a good cup of French roast coffee. And, this movie's not a comedy, but he has a lot of laughs, his search for the good cup of coffee, while they're all probably going to die. And Hank Azaria is very funny. Harry Shearer, who played a kind of similar role in The Truman Show, same summer, a little later, a couple of weeks later. The film just doesn't work because we don't care about any of the characters in the film. And an actress I kind of really like, Maria Patillo, plays a reporter who was the college, she and Matthew Broderick's character, they didn't just date, like they were engaged, and it didn't work out, but they seem to still be on good terms. But even the way Broderick relates to her, I just didn't buy it. And I think she was also miscast. So when you have two major roles where somebody like me, who is willing to give movies enormous latitude and benefit of the doubt, I'm wondering why these two people are cast in essentially the leads. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. So we don't care enough about the characters. When the spectacle happens, when the Godzilla creature starts fucking shit up in New York City, we get some terrific special effects shots. I mean, great top-end stuff, not surprisingly, but some really high-end work where it looks like they take a chunk out of, well, it was the Pan Am building, then the MetLife building. But great CGI, but then there's some very good model work. There's some great miniature work and practical effects. This film is top-notch in that department. but the creature itself doesn't look that great. And I feel like they didn't take enough advantage of what we know about it, what a Godzilla creature, even back then, is supposed to be able to do. And I think there are moments in the movie where he's supposed to be breathing fire, but I don't really know if he does, or if it's just that the special effect didn't look the way that it was supposed to. So the film is big, silly, stupid, goofy, and it is entertaining. But the 20% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, that is a really lousy score, and the audience score is not that much higher. People didn't like it. And from the box office perspective, if you just look at the raw numbers, the production and marketing budget was estimated to be somewhere between 125 and 150. Again, that's a lot of money for today. Time value money, you go back 27 years, that's a lot more. And it grossed 379 worldwide. Again, that's not a terrible number. This is not a disastrous box office tally. But the film did better overseas. Now, normally that's not a problem, but for a movie like this, it was supposed to do better here than there. And it grossed, I think, under 140 million in the United States and then made about 240 plus. Again, that's a great tally for the overseas market, but it means that the movie was fine for audiences where it wasn't in their language, so to speak, and the subtitles and the dubbing, they were just looking for spectacle and they got it. But American audiences, by and large, rejected the movie. Now, the reason why I keep referencing Roger Ebert, those who don't know, if you're new to the channel, and maybe you heard of the name, was he a movie guy? Yes. So Roger Ebert and his TV partner, Gene Siskel. Unfortunately, they're both gone now. In the case of Gene's been gone for more than 25 years. He was not very old when he passed. He was in his early 50s, I believe. Roger's been gone a dozen years. They were the two most recognizable movie critics in the world for decades. They started as just writers, where Gene Siskel wrote a movie review, and he did regular pieces where he interviewed major, filmmakers and actors and actresses and producers and stuff like that. But he was the lead movie critic for the Chicago Tribune going back to, I believe, the early 1970s. Roger Ebert was the lead film critic for the Chicago Sun-Times, also going back to the late 60s. And Roger Ebert won a Pulitzer Prize for criticism. He was not just a random funny guy, because he was very entertaining on TV. I got to meet him once, an amazing public speaker. On top of all of his other talents, he was funny as hell. He could have been a stand-up comic. The guy did everything well. He spoke beautifully. He was snarky, but he absolutely loved movies. And those two guys, Siskel and Ebert, were teamed up by television in a show that was syndicated across the country for about almost 25 years, really until Gene got sick. Unfortunately, right around the time Godzilla came out, he had brain surgery, and ultimately it was brain cancer. And I don't think it was tumors. I think it was brain cancer that killed him. But I apologize so deeply if I got that wrong. But he had brain surgery, and he ended up dying in 1999, I believe. But the two guys were put together on TV in the 70s, and their show was wildly successful, in part because they spoke like regular people who were passionate about movies, but they didn't talk down to the average person tuning in, to one of the local affiliates to listen to them talk about, usually the movies that were opening that week. And in Roger's review column for the Sun-Times, he did in fact give a star rating. He went out of the old 4-star must system, which is how I always did it. Now people do out of 5, out of 10, and some people still do the old school method of out of 4. But on the TV show, they did not say 3 stars, 2 stars, 2.5, 4 stars. No, they simply did thumbs up or thumbs down. That's how you found out, did Siskel and Ebert like such and such a movie? And as quaint as this seems, there are movies that became hits or became bigger hits or sleeper hits, often on the strength of 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. Their words carried a lot of weight in the industry, and they took their jobs seriously. They were big supporters and boosters of independent film, of documentary film. They famously, in 1994, the year of Pulp Fiction, Shawshank, and Forrest Gump, they disagreed a lot, and that made for great TV when they had those vehement disagreements. But they both believed that Hoop Dreams, a fantastic documentary about a couple of inner city basketball players, they both had as their best film of the year, and they were really mad that it didn't do better at that year's Oscars, but Gump and Pulp Fiction were pretty much, well, more so Gump, Runaway Train in that particular year. So Siskel and Ebert were very popular. They were unpopular in certain circles, and there were certain filmmakers, like none other than the late, great David Lynch, who had issues with some of Ebert's reviews. Gene Siskel, for example, was an enormous fan of Blue Velvet. He thought it was the best movie of its type since Psycho 26 years earlier. Roger Ebert thought the film was catastrophically, offensively bad. And Lynch just thought that Ebert, the guy had the wrong take. What are you going to do? And then ultimately, in later years, they became friends. But there were certain filmmakers that did not like Siskel and Ebert. They thought that they were doing worse because they were still too intellectual and they were giving lousy ratings and thumbs downs to movies that the masses were going to enjoy, such as Independence Day and their previous film before that, Stargate, which I saw. I gotta be honest, I don't think Stargate is very good. I like the casting of Oscar winner Jay Davidson. She was in The Crying Game. I like the fact that she was cast as a kind of androgynous sun god. Like, that was really, really cool casting by Emmerich and Devlin. But they seem to have a little bit of an issue with Siskel and Ebert. And so the movie Godzilla gives them the opportunity to, in a very lighthearted, comedic way, poke a little bit of fun at the two most famous movie critics of the day, but realistically of all time, in Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. So the movie Godzilla, a lot of it was shot, the non-special effects things. There were a ton of second unit shots and some first unit shots that actually were filmed in the Manhattan of the day. Presumably sometime in the fall of 1997 is when it would have gone, before the cameras, summer, fall, maybe into the winter of 97. There is an actor who passed, I want to say a couple of years ago, Michael Lerner. He kind of looked like Roger Ebert. I would have said this 30 years ago. He was in Barton Fink. I'm pretty sure he was an Oscar nominee for Barton Fink, Michael Lerner. A kind of a short-ish, roly-poly, very, very kind of gregarious, big personalities. Wonderful. Those are the Coen brothers, Barton Fink. Many still consider that to be the best movie they ever made. It's really a mindfuck times 10. Crazy movie. But what do you expect from Joel and Ethan Coen? So, Emmerich and Devlin wanted to have a little bit of fun with Siskel and Ebert. They wanted to kind of get their point across that they thought these guys, or at least one of them, we don't really like this guy very much, but we're going to do something in a kind of funny way to get our point across. So they cast Michael Lerner, who long before this, people were saying, he could be he could be Roger Ebert's, first cousin, or maybe even his brother. They really do resemble one another, similar shape to the face, et cetera, et cetera. The joke is Roger Ebert saying, I was better looking than Michael Lerner anyway. But the mayor of New York City, in the world of this film, in the world of Godzilla, his name is Ebert. Now, I often use the phrase, this is not an accident, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. That is very much a direct crack at Roger Ebert. Mayor Ebert. Sorry. Mayor Ebert's chief of staff is a dead ringer for Gene Siskel. He is a dead ringer. He looks like Gene Siskel. He doesn't look like his brother. This guy, if you look quickly, is that Gene? No. It's just a guy who looks an awful lot like him. I think his name was Larry Goldman. I forgot the guy's name. So you have the Siskel and Ebert dynamic, the fact that they agreed on a lot of stuff, but they were always bickering about movies because their best episodes, as I say, they disagreed on Blue Velvet. They disagreed on Silence of the Lambs. Siskel hated it. Ebert loved it. They disagreed on Unforgiven, where Ebert was a big fan. Siskel didn't even give it a thumbs up, and Ebert, I thought, was going to strangle him. But they had this weird frenemy type dynamic. So in the world of this movie, Mayor Ebert is presented as a moron. He is presented as an empty suit who is a junk food fanatic, always eating sweets, where his partner, and the guy's name is Gene, the guy who looks just like Gene Siskel, his name in the movie is Gene. So as we're watching this film, and Mayor Ebert is verbally thrashing Gene, the whole movie he is ripping on this guy. And some people in attendance didn't get the joke, but a lot of people did. And when Michael Lerner was first introduced as Mayor Ebert, I started laughing. And every single time Mayor Ebert and Gene appeared on screen, there was some kind of a nod to the real Siskel and Ebert, where they start having an argument. And Mayor Ebert goes, "Why do I even keep you around?" So I was laughing at this kind of side story, which is supposed to be Siskel and Ebert kind of transported into the world of this movie. Mayor Ebert and Gene. So each time they appear, there's like more of a contentiousness between them. And I'm laughing harder and harder as this is going on. So finally, no spoilers, we get to the end of the movie, or close to the end of the movie. And Mayor Ebert and Gene have one last argument. They have one last argument, and Gene says to Mayor Ebert, he basically quits. And he says, "You know what I think of you? Your whole campaign? When I tell you the character of Gene giving Mayor Ebert the thumbs down, that was the single biggest laughter attack I have had in my entire life. When I saw him do that, I was already in the mood. I was already laughing every time these guys appeared on screen. When the character of Gene gave Mayor Ebert thumbs down, I did not just laugh. I started screaming. I have never screamed as loud in my life. I was completely out of control. And I was with my sister, and, you know, if my sister tunes into this, Jessica, I'm really sorry for embarrassing you that day. Jess would have been, you know, she was really young. She was like probably 15 at the time. But I screamed. Now, there were a lot of people laughing, but nobody had the reaction I had. I screamed for about 10 seconds, and then I covered myself up. I tried to stop, but I could not stop laughing. So I am apoplectic. I am laughing so hard, it is just impossible. So movie comes to an end, and I am still beyond help. I can't help. I can't stop laughing. I've been fans of these guys my whole life, and this entire movie appears to be building to a Siskel and Ebert thumbs down from Gene. What are you doing here? I need you. So I was still laughing when we got back to the car. And here's a little ridiculous piece of the story. The next day, I was at Bev's gym bright and early like usual, and there was a woman that I knew from Bev's, nice lady. We used to do cardio, and she sees me at Bev's and comes running over and goes, "What the heck were you laughing at last night?" I said, what are you were there? She says, "Yeah, my husband and I, we were going to go see the next showing." "Who, was that your sister?" I say, "Yeah, it was my sister." "What were you laughing at? I thought they were going to have to call security. I've never seen anyone laugh that hard." This was 5 to 10 minutes after this. I was still completely out of control. So I told her what happened. It didn't really hit for her. She knew who Siskel and Ebert were. It just didn't land for her. I said, "What can I tell you? I got a weird sense of humor." The whole movie, they're doing this Siskel and Ebert thing. And at the end, I didn't realize the movie seems to be building to that moment. So this is not a good movie. Godzilla is not good, but it is responsible for the single biggest laughter attack of my life. I couldn't even drive for the first 5 minutes we were in the car. Every time I thought I calmed down, I saw the image of the guy doing the thumbs down, and I started, it was unbelievable. It was more than 15 minutes of hysterics. And finally, I was able to calm down, drive home. And if I was asked, "How's the movie?" I said, "This is 1.5 stars out of 4. I can't recommend it. Unless you're a huge fan of Siskel and Ebert, in which case, I think that angle is going to make the film worthwhile, if nothing else, from the comedic angle. The fact that every time they're on screen, you're going to laugh. And then the final bow of the character of Gene will have you howling, I think. Although one person I knew who saw the movie on my recommendation said, "I didn't think that angle was funny at all. I don't know what your problem is." Well, what can I tell you? That's what makes a horse race. There's a lot of stuff that I don't find funny. I didn't think There's Something About Mary, same summer. I didn't think that movie was funny at all. There were people around me that I thought were going to need hospitalization. They were laughing so hard when Ben got his privates caught, and with the old lady with the skin in it. I was horrified most of the way through. I didn't think the film was funny. I couldn't understand why so many people were cracking up. But that's the way it goes. And that is my story of seeing this movie, Godzilla, released on this day, 1998. I hope you've enjoyed episode, I think we're up to 515 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your early Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.